Yeah, it started.
All right, so you can take over from here, Shrenik.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shrenik, and
One second. I think what we can do is for the presentation time, we can shut off every other video other than Shrenik's. And then, but when we are asking a question or when we are interacting, I think you please switch on your video so that we can have an interactive discussion while looking at the face.
okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shrenik, and my topic of my BTP would be comparative analysis of different control strategies for active heat compensation. Okay. So this presentation is mainly divided into 7 chapters. Like first chapter being the introduction, which includes the background and motivation and the objective of the project. Second being the ship motion modeling. Third being the dynamic model of the winch. The fourth being the classical controllers that I tried to implement. The fifth being data-driven control. Sixth being RL-based control, and finally the results. Starting with what is heave compensation. So it is basically a technique that is used for lifting equipments to reduce the influence of waves upon offshore operations. So heave compensation methods are mainly divided into 2 types, one being passive heave compensation and the other being active heave compensation. So a passive heave compensation is somewhat like an open loop systems that is only used to observe energy at certain frequencies, certain range of frequencies. Okay, and the demerit of passive heave compensation is that though it takes less power, uh, the compensation performance is quite less as compared to active field compensation. Talking about what active field compensation is, like it is an active closed to feedback system that provides the payload displacement as a feedback to the controller at every time instant so that an improved compensation is achieved. So it's like saying that if you want to keep a payload regulated under the water, if your primary objective is to keep the position control, then an ideal choice would be to use an active field compensation system. If your primary objective is to make the force in the string, that is the force in the cable to which the payload is attached to be constant, then you need to use passive field compensation. The figure here shows gives an idea of what active field compensation is. So as you progress with time, the ship will move from 1 to 2 to 3. And due to that, and due to waves, the ship is bound to exhibit oscillatory vertical motions. So the objective of heave compensation is to make sure that the payload motion is decoupled from the ship's heave motion. So it's like saying that if the ship heaves by some z amount upwards, the objective of the primary objective of the heave compensation system is to reel down the length by that much amount so that the submerged load depth over here is maintained constant. So the objective of this project is mainly to do a comparative study of different control strategies, which can range from classical control to machine learning based control for active heave compensation. The effectiveness of each controller will be determined with respect to 4 cases, namely being first, heave compensation performance, second being whether the controller is able to track a particular offset, third being disturbance rejection, and fourth being measurement noise attenuation. And also the ability of each controller in handling the saturation of the normalized wash angle will also be analyzed. Starting with the modeling of the ship, that is the method as to how we can generate the heave time of the ship.
Shrenik,
Yeah.
What is wash angle?
Yeah, I'll explain it later. In the state space model of the drive is there, I'll explain there.
Okay.
Okay. So starting with ship motion modeling, the method that I adopted comprises mainly of 5 steps. The first step is like I calculated the spectrum of the wave for different sea states. So in this study, I analyzed the efficacy of the controllers for 4 sea states, namely being slight sea state, moderate sea state, rough sea state, and very rough sea state. So first step that I used was I calculated the PM spectrum for the wave for different sea states. Then I loaded the REOs of the cases special. So these REOs were actually obtained from an MDL Hydro software, which is a frequency domain tool for wave structure interaction. So note that this REO also accounts for added mass, radiation damping, and scattering forces as well. So once the RO is obtained, the response spectrum of the the response spectrum of the 3 degree of freedom motions, mainly heave, roll, and pitch. Since our primary objective is to calculate the net heave of the vessel, okay, I tried to calculate the time history only for these 3 degrees of freedom, namely heave, roll, and pitch. Okay, and for each degree of freedom of motion, the response spectrum is given by equation number 1. Then finally, inverse fast Fourier transform is used to convert these degrees of freedom back into time domain. So just say we have a ship and we have a crane placed over the ship, just say over here. Okay, and it's not exactly matching with the ship's center of gravity. So just say it's located at some X and Y location from the body fixed coordinate system O. Our objective is to find the net heave at this point, the extreme end point. Our objective is to find the net heave at that point. So in order to calculate that point, we can approximate that the time history of that winch as this one, as equation number 2, where neta 3 is the heave time history, neta 4 is the roll time history, and neta 5 is the pitch time history, and X crane and Y crane being the location of the crane with respect to the ship, and beta S being the slewing gear angle, in the sense that the crane can move, can rotate 360 degree about the Z axis.
Shrenik?
Yeah.
So why is it that I need this net time history, net heave time history?
Yeah, the reason why we need net heave time history is because the payload, the point about which the payload is being put under the water is this point, the extreme end of the crane. So our objective is to make sure that the reed length is opposite of this net heave time history and not the time history of the ship. Because when the ship heaves, it is also bound to roll and pitch due to like they both are correlated, right? So if the ship heaves, it's bound to exhibit roll and pitch motions, and due to that, our objective is to make sure that the tip of the crane's heave time history is tracked and not the ship's heave time history.
Is that clear for everybody?
Shrenik, is it possible to explain the step 5 once again?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, did you understand that like our objective is to make sure that we track the opposite of the crane's heave time history and not the ship's?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So now just say we have any particular, like just say don't assume any crane. Just say that you are at a X and Y location on the ship, which is not coinciding with the body coordinate center of gravity of the ship. So we have actually learned in one of the courses that the Z coordinate, the net Z at that location is given by the heave plus the net X times neta 4.
Okay.
The net Y times neta 4 minus the net X times neta 5. So it's the same thing. Okay. So just see if you are placed at X crane, Y crane, if the location of the crane is X crane, Y crane. Okay, and the length of the crane, this being L crane. So the net Y would be Y crane plus L crane sine beta S. And
yes,
yeah. So the plot on the top right shows the PM spectra, which shows the PM spectrum for different sea states, namely slight, moderate, rough, and very rough. The plots on the bottom right are the REOs, which are heave, roll, and pitch, which was obtained using MDL Hydro Toolbox or just a software. And the plots on the top left or on the left are the net heave time history of the KCS vessel. So it's this Z winch, which I'm trying to plot on the left. So we get, this is a plot of 100-second snip of a time history for each sea state. Okay.
How many components did you choose in your generation of the waves?
I didn't get your point, sir. Can you repeat?
So in generating the irregular time history, how many components did you discretizely choose?
Yeah. So I took N as 10,000.
Sorry?
I took n as 100,001.
And how was the time history?
Yeah, so it was a 10,000 second time history with a sampling time of 0.1 seconds.
Okay, so which means how many components did you choose?
Yeah, so it's like taking n as 10,000 times 10. So it's 100,000.
Did you have 100,000 components or half of that?
I guess 100,000 components.
I am pretty sure you probably had half of that.
Okay.
Because of the Nyquist frequency, you can't sample more than the Nyquist frequency.
Oh yeah, correct. Like while sampling, I took it as half of that. But while generating the wave time history, I took it as 10,000 times 10.
Yes, but they won't have an effect on your this one, right? No, in your wave time history, you took it as 10,000, 100,000 components.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So now talking about the
I
yeah.
have another question. So, how was this wave environment generated? Like, is it a unidirectional wave or a
Yeah, so it's a unidirectional wave, and all the study that I've done over here is for a wave incident angle of 135 degrees. And the reason why I took 135 degrees is I wanted the ship to experience all 3 degrees of freedom of motion so that we can get a clear picture.
Okay, so how do you think in actual cases, in actual environment, how it may vary, like from your current observations? Any idea
Yeah,
about that?
in actual situations, the first thing is that I assume linear wave theory in order to calculate the time history. In actual real life applications, we might have non-linear waves, and then the effect of that on the interaction of the ship might be different. So the heave time history can also be different.
Okay.
So the whole study has been done using linear wave theory.
Okay, and one more thing, like what is meant by the single moderate rough and very rough sea state? Like
Yeah,
how
so
is
I
it?
just specified in the sense that for slight sea state, we have a particular significant wave height and a particular significant peak time period. So just say for PM spectrum, in order to determine the wave characteristic, we just need two parameters, right? One is the significant wave height and the peak time period.
Yeah.
So based on those two, I'm determining whether it's a slight sea state, moderate, rough, or very rough.
Okay,
So a lower significant wave height means a slight sea state, and higher means moderate, like that. And the thing is that significant wave height and the peak time period actually go hand in hand. So that's why I'll show you later as to what all HS and TP values I took for each sea state, so that you can get a clear picture. Oh, otherwise you can see here as well. So HS is 1.5 and TP is 6.
Okay, so as I
4
think,
and 9,
okay.
6 and 12, and 8.5 and 4.
Yes.
So now talking about the dynamic model of the winch. The state space model for the winch is given as per equation 3, where A is the system matrix, B is the input matrix. Okay. Now our primary objective is to make sure that the output Y, which is the ZW, which indicates the reed length of the rope above that crane, the extreme end point of the crane, tracks the exact opposite of the ship's net heave. So it's like saying that if the ship goes up by say 10 meters, we want Y, which is over here, YZW, to be minus 10 in order to make sure that the payload is kept at a constant height. So over here, the states defined are XP, delta P, ZW dot, and ZW, where XP indicates the swash angle of the pump, delta P indicates the change in pressure of the fluid, ZW dot indicates the velocity of the reed length of the rope, and ZW indicates the length of the reed length. Okay.
Shrinik, I think you might want to go back to the previous slide and explain exactly what's going on. I don't think your friends have understood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this is the schematic diagram of the closed loop winch, the hydraulic drive. So what happens is our primary interest is in applying a control input such that this ZW is the opposite of the ship's heave. Now the working behind this is that first we control the amount of rotation of the electric motor Okay, so by varying the control input, we change the motor's RPM, which is omega p. Due to that, the swash angle of the pump keeps on changing. Okay, and if the swash angle of the pump changes, if just say if the swash angle is of higher value, the flow keeps on increasing, and due to flow increase, there's a high change in pressure that takes place on both the sides of the hydraulic lines. And due to this change in hydraulic lines, the fixed displacement motor rotates about say omega n. Okay, and by this transmission, by applying some gear transmission K, it's connected to the winch drive. So if motor is rotated by omega m, it would be winch would rotate by omega w, and that rotation would cause the payload to go reel down. Now
when you mean swash angle, it means relates to the valve angle, right?
Yeah, valve angle. Okay. So the amount of fluid you are allowing the pump to pass.
So it's just a control valve?
Yeah, it's a control valve. So it's like I'm not controlling directly the swash angle, but rather I'm controlling UP, which is the control input. And the relation between the swash angle and the control input that I'm applying is a first order system. So if I just say, if I make the control input to change it by some amount, it would take some time for the swash angle to take that into account.
Yeah, can you tell that again? What exactly is the control input?
Yeah, so UP is a control input signal that I'm trying to change. Okay, and the relation between the control input and the swash angle XP is given by a first order system, which is as shown from the first row. So it's like saying that XW dot XP dot is equal to -1 by TW times XP plus U times U by TW. So if you change the control input, it would take some time for the swash angle to reach to change depending on the TW. So over here I set the time constant as 1 second.
So it's an exponential rate.
No, it's an exponent. No, it's like saying that if I just make a change of 1, like if I make some change, it would take approximately 1 second to see that change in the swash angle. It's like saying that.
Ashwin is right in the sense that it is an exponential function. It's a first order differential equation, which means that there is some delay between when you apply the control input and when you see the actual swash angle change, right?
Yeah.
Also, I think what you have mentioned here is that are we controlling omega p?
No, we are not controlling omega p. We are controlling UP.
Correct. So omega p is the angular velocity of the electric motor with which you are driving the pump. So the rotational speed of the pump is invariant. It's going to be kept at omega p. You're only adjusting the swash angle XP in order to change the amount of flow Q. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are changing XP with the help of omega p, right?
No. Omega p is fixed constant. It's kept constant, and we are changing UP, and by changing UP, XP is changing through a first order system.
So, what do you mean by a variable displacement pump?
Okay, so variable displacement pump means that the displacement is not fixed. So just say if you have a swash angle of 0.1 and a swash angle of say 0.8, it would not be 8 times that.
Can you explain what is swash angle?
Okay, so swash angle is just an indicative measure of how much you are allowing the pump to pass the fluid through it. So the Q flow rate is being controlled by the swash angle XP. So.
Okay, I think what he's trying to tell there is that the displacement of the pump is not constant. So unlike on the other side, you see it's a fixed displacement motor, which means the amount of fluid passing through it is constant. Here, the variable displacement means that the displacement is variable, and you basically have a valve which can be adjusted to control what this flow rate Q can be. So even though your rotation rate is fixed, by controlling how much you are allowing the fluid to come in, you are able to adjust that using what is called as the swash angle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So the
Any other questions before he moves on?
Yeah, can you explain where it goes from how it goes from the variable pump to the fixed pump and what is happening in between?
yeah. So after it goes from the variable pump, the hydraulic fluid passes on both the sides of the pump, and based on the change in pressure that takes place on both the sides of the hydraulic lines, the rotation of the angular rotation omega m is determined. It's like saying that if you increase the valve, the P feed valve, to a higher value, you are allowing the pump to flow at a higher rate. So the change in pressure on both the sides would be higher, due to which the rotation omega m would be higher. If you keep the valve to a low value, the displacement through the variable displacement pump would be low, due to which the change in pressure would be small, due to which the displacement motor would rotate by a small RPM omega m. So it's like you're controlling this P feed. And based on P feed, XP is changing the swash angle through first order system. And once the XP is changing, the flow rate around both of these hydraulic lines is changing. And the change in this pressure on both these sides govern how much the rotation would be. How much the rotation of the fixed displacement motor would be.
Can you tell me why you need a variable displacement pump to control the fixed displacement motor and not directly control the fixed displacement motor?
So the primary objective of fixed displacement pump is based on a particular change in pressure on both the sides. It generates a particular RPM. The reason why I have placed variable displacement pump on the left side is I want to control the amount of fluid I want to pass through the variable displacement pump. And the reason I want to do is I want to manipulate the change in pressure along the hydraulic lines. The reason why I want to do that is I want to make sure that ZW is being changed as per my needs. So if I want to make sure that ZW, the payload displacement, moves as per my need, I need to manipulate omega W. So if I need to manipulate omega W, I need to manipulate omega M. So if I want to change the RPM of omega M, I need to control the change in pressure along these hydraulic lines on both the sides. So if I want to control the change in pressure, I need to manipulate this valve, the P feed valve, such that I want to, yeah. So hope you understand.
Okay, and I'm assuming that this fixed displacement motor is a very high torque motor, which is controlled by this mechanism, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Is there no other way to control the fixed displacement pump, or at least pass that torque to the winch directly instead of all this setup?
Yeah, like how exactly would you pass it directly to the winch?
Like, can't we directly use an electrical motor to do that?
Yeah, we can do it, but the benefit of using a hydraulic motor is that the power to weight ratio is more for hydraulic drive as compared to other motors like pneumatic motors, AC motors, electric motors, DC motors. Since like the payload we are using is of the order of tons, in the sense that we are using it like 1 ton, 1,000 tons. So our objective is like we need very high energy in order to like pull the rope or reel down the rope. So for that, a high amount of energy is required. A high amount of power is required. So that's the reason we use hydraulic motors.
Also, another reason why you want to go with this mechanism is that when you have an electric motor directly controlling the fixed displacement motor, you may have issues of backlash. But through a hydraulic system, you are able to better arrest the issues of backlash.
Okay, sir.
Any more questions?
And this leftmost one is an electric motor.
Yeah.
Isn't it generally some kind of diesel motor that actually drives?
No, I didn't understand. Can you repeat?
Like generally for hydraulic motor mechanism, wouldn't it be a diesel or some petroleum motor which drives the variable one?
I have no idea about that.
Okay.
All right, you can go ahead, Shrenik.
Yeah. So the state space model is governed by this equation number 3, where the states include the 4 states, which is xp, delta p, zw dot, and zw, where xp being the Swash angle. And the system matrix is given by equation number 5. So it's like saying that we would be manipulating the control input u, okay, up, that would change xp, and if xp changes, delta p changes. If delta p changes, zw dot changes, and if zw dot changes, zw changes. So it's like going from first to fourth. Okay, and the input and the output matrix is given by equation 6 and 7. The disturbance matrix is given by equation 8, where this term, which is r square mg by jw plus mr square, is the constant disturbance that is taking place because of the weight of the payload. So due to the weight of the payload, if you want to keep the load at that fixed position when you apply zero control input, this disturbance would have to be taken into account. So that plus some delta D is the total disturbance that I would be considering, and where D tilde is the disturbance that might be caused due to, say, unmodeled dynamics or the nonlinear friction, vibrations, or parametric uncertainty. And this disturbance, actually, I've assumed it to enter the system through the third state, which is through ZW dot. Okay.
Can you tell me the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so in actual systems, like in actual models, whenever we give any disturbance, we actually give it to Z velocity term itself. And the reason why they give it, I'm not quite sure, I don't know. But in the actual models, like in most of the models, they try to provide disturbance to the velocity term itself and not the position term. I don't know the exact reason behind it.
Shrenik,
Yeah.
how are you modeling the unmodeled disturbances there?
Yeah, so this is the disturbance that I'm considering, D bar.
Yeah.
Okay, this disturbance, the total D which I would be taking, which is D tilde plus R square mg, this I would be varying as per my needs to check whether the system is able to reject disturbance or not.
Okay.
So this D is what I would be generating it based on my need and checking whether I'm able to reject disturbance or not. I hope you understand.
In reality, D tilde is not known to you, isn't it? It is unmodeled dynamics. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
So how would you go about saying that it will always be robust?
No, I thought he would be using white noise process or something like that to represent D tilde.
No, not exactly. I would be generating the D disturbance, the total disturbance from a constant, like from a spectrum actually. So I would be assuming some cut-in and cut-off frequency with some spectral density value, and from that I would be generating the time history. So since disturbance is generally observed to be a low frequency signal, I would be generating it from a spectrum with a cut-in and cut-off frequency of a low value, so that I can get low frequency signals and then inject it into the system, this equation number 3, and see whether I'm able to reject the disturbance or not.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So the basic schematic diagram of the winch control system is shown like this, where the desired reference would be the opposite of the heave time history at the crane, at the tip of the crane. Okay, that would be the reference in our case. And the controller would be the various controllers that I would be using. Winch system includes the model dynamics. The model dynamics that I explained recently would be included in the winch system P. And the output that I get Y would be the reed length of the rope, which I want it to track the desired reference. So I've tried to add, I've not directly added Y to the reference. Rather, I've tried to add it through some noise, which generally comes from the sensor feedback. So just say you have the Y data with you. In real life applications, that would be generally provided to you through some IMU. So I may be corrupted with noise. Due to that, I'm trying to model the noise dynamics as well. So I'm trying to check whether when I add noise or I add disturbance to the system, how good the control is at doing it. Like in most of the real life applications, this noise is generally rejected through various filters like Kalman filter. However, I want to see over here is that whether this controller is actually able to reject those noise and not use any Kalman filter or any such things to do it. So I want to check which controller is able to do that or which controller is able to reject disturbance better. Okay. So the first controller,
Srini, this is a linear controller, right?
yeah, linear control.
Okay.
The first controller that I've used is PD controller, which is a basic proportional derivative controller. And in order for a controller to work, we need to actually tune those values in order to get the performance we desire. So these gains for this PD control, namely proportional gain and derivative gain, were tuned using loop shaping approach. And the reason why I didn't use PID controller is because the plant already has an integrator inbuilt in it, in the sense that we are integrating ZW dot as well. It's because of that I use PD controller, and the tune gains for this PD controller were actually used using loop shaping approach. So loop shaping approach is a kind of tuning method using frequency domain. So through frequency approach, we actually try to tune the gains. Okay. And over here, TF is the time constant for the noise filter. So the reason why I included TF as also in this control law is our primary goal would also be to attenuate noise. So the using the loop shaping approach, I try to tune these three parameters, and this way the tune gains that I got. And over here, like if you keep TFS small, it's like saying that it's more insensitive to noise. It's more sensitive to noise. So if you keep TFS as small as possible, then it's like saying that you're able to reject noise very properly. But it also comes with a downside that if there is no noise in the system, then there would be vibrations in the output, which I don't want. So we actually need to do a trade-off between both of this. So the trade-off comes out at TF is equal to 0.03 seconds. Okay, and the control law is given by equation 10, the Laplace domain.
And what is the loop shaping approach?
So that's actually a long process. That's why I felt like not explaining this PPT. I don't have the figure right now here. I have it in the PDF. Shall I explain it?
Unless until your friends are interested.
Yeah, if you're interested, I can explain you the loop shaping approach.
Did you model system in Simulink and try to use this approach?
No. Like I didn't use Simulink to tune this. I used some MATLAB code in order to do the loop shaping tuning, and then implemented it on a Simulink model. So once I have the gains with me, the tuned gains, I implemented it on Simulink through the system.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to know loop shaping approach, I can explain. Does anyone want?
I think for now you can go ahead with your presentation.
The second controller that I tried to implement is model predictive control. So it's a type of a discrete control algorithm that determines the optimal control, that determines the output required to reach a particular set point by minimizing the cost function J, which is given by equation 11. So over here, the things that we need to change is the Q and QP and R, which are some matrices that would be depending upon our performance requirement. Okay. Over here, NC is set to be the control horizon and NP is set to be the prediction horizon. Okay. Now there is also like a big explanation regarding how MPC works. I'll not try to get into that. I'll just try to get how I tune those values. Okay. So over here, the things that are in our control is the Q matrix, P matrix, the R matrix. So our objective over here is that the MPC tries to do a cost optimization in a receding time window. So in particular time window, it tries to find an optimal control input such that this cost function is minimized. And this window keeps on changing at every time instant. So over here, Q, P, and R are the matrices that we need to choose. depending upon our performance requirement. So in this, I used MPC toolbox in order to find this Q, P, and R and NC and NP values. So over here, I set Q as 7 and P as 0.1. So that is indicative that P as 0.1 and R as 0.01. So that is indicative that I'm giving more weightage to the compensated motion. So I'm trying to make sure that the compensated motion is more, and I'm not worrying much about whether like the control input is more or not. Even if the control input is more, I'm not worried about it. My main objective is to check that the payload motion is minimized. That's why I set Q to be 7, a higher weight to 7, and the rate of change of control input had a weight of 0.01. And the NP and NC that I choose were 20 and 4. In most of the practical application, it's suggested to choose NC as 20% of NP. So NP was set as 20 seconds. So NC would be around 20% of NP. That's why I set it as 4. So I kept NP as fixed constant 20. So depending on that, 20% of that is 4. Or just 20% of that is 4. NC was dependent on that. So this is like a trial and error method. It's that we can also get better results or we can get poor results as well, depending on how we choose these weights, NP, NC, Q, P, and R. Okay, so this is what I did using trial and error approach. Now,
can you go back one slide? Okay, I think I'll ask my question after you cover LQI.
Yeah. So now talking about LQI, it's an optimal control which minimizes the cost function J. Okay, the J over here would be not this 11, but something rather different. Like the difference between LQI's J is that in LQI's J, this won't be Y plus Z winch. It would be rather the states of the system. It's like saying X transpose times Q times X plus summation of U times P times U would be the cost function for the LQI control case. So our task over here is to find the gain matrix K such that this cost of function is minimized. And over here, the optimization takes place in a fixed window. So just say if you have a time history and we want to find an optimal gain matrix K such that this is minimized, it would be a global optimal solution and not a suboptimal solution, which is unlike in the case of an MPC. And the strict feedback control UP, which minimized the above cost function, is given by U is equal to minus KX. The K is something we need to find out. So this K was calculated using the LQI function from MATLAB. Okay, and the way this LQI function works is that it tries to calculate K using some equation, which is known as the Riccati equation. So there's some long-term equation given. So I don't feel the need to write it over here. You can actually look at this literature. You find. So that is generally obtained by solving the Riccati equation. Okay, and using the LQI function, I tried to find the K matrix, which led to equation number 13 for my model.
Okay, so if we go back to the MPC versus LQI, I think one thing you have clearly mentioned that here we are only interested in Y plus Z winch, whereas in the LQI, we read the entire state vector, correct?
Yeah.
Now, how does this NP and NC play a role? What are those values going to when I'm doing an LQI?
How are those NC and NP?
So what values of NP and NC if I choose, I'm kind of emulating the same effect as LQI.
Okay. I'm setting NP to be of very high value and NC to be of very low value.
If you want to achieve a LQI sort of a behavior?
Yeah, because the thing that happens in LQI is that we try to optimize it through a full window, like a fixed window. So it's like saying that if I increase NP to a very high value, I'm saying that I'm not moving the window itself. I'm keeping the window fixed.
Is the window finite or infinite in LQI?
The window is infinite. Right?
Window is infinite, both for the control as well as for the state, or is it different for the two?
I'm not sure about the control input, but for the output, for the state, it's high.
It's also infinite for the control input. So in essence, you're saying that you want some sort of a global optimal behavior, which tries to not only perform well at this step, but for all the future horizons that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is a good time to take a little bit of a break and ask for some questions, if there are any. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. By asking more questions only, you learn and you also help your friend streamline his presentation. No questions?
I actually lost the connect link when he started with the controllers part. Can you get like a brief summary of each type?
Yeah. So the three controllers that I've discussed till now is PD controller, which is the general proportional derivative control, followed by model predictive control and linear quadratic integral control. Okay. Talking about the PD control, I've tried to include one more term in it, which is the TF term, which is generally indicative of the time constant for the noise filter. Okay, and the reason why I included that is that I want the controller to attenuate measurement noise. And the method that I used in order to tune these gains KP, KD, and TF is loop shaping approach, which is a frequency domain based approach. Okay, and these are the values that I get when I use the loop tune command from MATLAB. And the control input or the control law for this PD control in the Laplace domain is given by equation number 10. So where E of t represents the error, which is this error, which I want it to minimize. That is reference minus yn. That would be a reference. In our case was the opposite of the net heave time history, which is minus of z winch. Error would be minus of z winch minus of zw of t. So it's like minus zw of t plus z winch bracket inside the bracket. So that would be the error in our case.
So is this like the in maneuvering course, like we had that last part, the observability also included. Is it similar to that?
I don't exactly remember which part are you talking about, but like it's a general control system. Just say if you have a reference R and you get an output Y, you want the controller to manipulate UP such that R minus phi is minimized. So the same thing we're doing here.
I think he's talking about whether the system is controllable or not.
Yeah, I tried to check it and the system seems to be controllable. And, I tried to calculate the controllability matrix and the observability matrix. And for both of these, the order of the rank was coming out to be 4.
Okay.
So it's both observable and controllable. Okay. Now talking about MPC. MPC is a kind of a discrete control algorithm that tries to minimize this cost optimization given by equation number 11. And this inside that equation, we have this Q, P, and R, right? So these are actually changed depending on our performance requirement. So if you want to add more weightage to the compensated motion, I would rather give Q a higher value and P a lower value, P and R a lower value. So this is what I did. I gave Q as a higher value and P as to some 0.1 and 0.01, because I don't want the controller to shoot up to infinity in order to achieve its compensation ability. Okay, and the NP and NC are the prediction the control horizon. So it's like saying that NP prediction horizon states that at one time instant, at particular time instant, how much time in the future are you predicting the output? And in NC states that at first time instant, how much control inputs are you applying after that time instant in order to see the output? So if NC is 4, that means you're applying control input for the next 4 seconds and you're calculating the output for the next 20 seconds from that particular time instant. Then when you go to the next time instant, then you're doing the same thing again. The next 4 control inputs you're applying, and then you're calculating the output for the next 20 seconds. And each time you're progressing with time, you're trying to minimize the error between the predicted output at the next time instant and that time instant. So hope you are able to understand.
Yeah.
Okay. Now talking about LQI control, it's like the demerit of okay. So LQI control is an optimal control which tries to do the same thing as MPC but in a fixed time window. This was in a receding time window, right? So just say you you try to optimize it within some NP window and NC window. But in LQI, you're keeping the window fixed. That means you're keeping NP and NC fixed, and you're trying to calculate the matrix K such that compensation is achieved. And in order to do that, we need to know all the states in advance, and that is something we don't know in real life applications. So over here, in order to implement this control law, we actually need to know all the states X, which is XP, delta P, ZW dot, ZW, and XC. But in our model, in our state space, what we had specified C as 0, 0, 0, 1. That means we have only ZW known to us. So based on ZW itself, can I control the model? But what LQI requires is that it requires all these states to be known. All these 4 states followed by XC, where XC indicates the integral of the error between the reference and the output. And the reason why I used XC term as well, extra term, is because I want to minimize the steady state error. So if I don't use XC, I just use these 4 states, it would be an LQR control. That means I want to regulate it about a particular set point. But in my case, the set point is varying at each and every time instant. So that's why I need to add an integrator term XC, which would try to minimize that error. So the difference between LQI and LQR is that there is an integral action in LQI, which minimizes the steady state error. So if you have a varying set point, it's rather good to use a LQI control. If you have a fixed set point, just say you want to track if you want to shift from 0 to 4 only and keep it as constant, then you would rather prefer LQR control. Okay, and this gain K was actually tuned using LQI function. But this LQI function inside, like how it works is that it tries to solve the Riccati equation. Okay, and it tries to find K. And the K that I got was this 13. So over here, K is a 1 cross 5 matrix, right? 1 cross 5 matrix. And X is, and this state is 5 cross 1. So the whole thing would be 1 cross 1, which would be manipulating our control input.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
So shall I proceed with?
Yeah, please proceed.
Yeah, so the next controller that I tried to use was sliding mode control. So this is a non-linear control approach, like this is a non-linear control strategy that actually tries to change the dynamics with the help of a discontinuous signal that actually forces the system to slide along a cross section. So it's like saying that I want, okay, so there are 2 steps in SMC design. The first step is actually to design a sliding surface so that the plant restricted to the sliding surface has a desired system response. And the second being the constructing a switched feedback gain necessary to drive the plant's trajectory. So just say if you are at a particular sliding surface and there is some, if you go out of the sliding surface, the second step would make sure that you stay on the sliding surface. So that is what the sliding mode control works. Now I know that I have not explained sliding mode control properly, and it's a huge, like it's a big method in order to explain. So maybe you can refer to my PDF or I can explain it if anyone is interested. So is anyone interested in knowing the science behind sliding mode control?
I think a little bit more information would have been useful, but if it's not in your presentation, then please proceed forward.
Yeah, so the gains for this controller.
Yeah, I had one question. How did you modify the linear controller for SMC?
Okay, the modification in the sense that how did I tune the gains, right?
No, did you not have to modify the equations you had?
No, I don't have to modify the equation. So it's like saying that I have a sliding surface, okay, which would be in terms of derivatives of error, and I would be equating that derivative of the sliding surface to some switching frequency, switching oscillatory behavior, which is given by minus kp times signum of s. So there's nothing like it would be changing, right? The only thing that would be changing is kp and k.
There is nothing better than having a slide and then talking about it rather than talking about equations just like that.
Yeah.
It really will not make it a point. Okay, that is something you probably are also getting a feedback now from your friends.
Yes. We'll try to add it next month.
You should at least have these as a backup slides so that when the discussion does come up, you can refer to them and then be able to explain.
Okay. So these are the controllers. Okay. So now these are the classical control approaches that I tried to use. Now talking about the machine learning based control approaches, I try to use two approaches. One is data driven control and other is RL based control. Now to start with data driven control, I'll try to give an introduction to what data driven control is. So data driven control is a broad family of control system in which you try to control the plant purely based on experimental data. And this has been quite a demanding topics in recent times because a lot of models are becoming quite non-linear in nature. The only thing that we have is a lot of data and we don't know what to do with that data. So the benefit of using data-driven control is that it tries to use those data in order to control the plant that we want to do. Okay, and the way it works is that just say you have an input and output of the input and output data. Okay, you try to train it through a particular neural network. Okay, and once you train it, you're actually making the model to capture the dynamics through the data that you have. And once you have that, when you provide a new data to it, it tries to capture those dynamics. So the way it can be used in my cases, I'll try to explain. So over here, the objective of the control is to track the opposite of the net heave, right? So, and the compensated motion is given as a sum of the output and the net heave of the vessel. So over here, I have tried to use a kind of a neural network, which comprises of long short-term memory networks, which is a select type of RNN, to predict the actuate input signal when a particular net heave time history is provided as an input to the deep neural network. So what I'm trying to do is I'm taking a neural network, which comprises of a particular number of layers, and I'm trying to train it with input and output data, where in this case, my input would be the output of the winch model when a PD controller is implemented, and input is the control input to the winch, the PD control input of the winch. So it's like saying that I'm training it with a lot of different C states, and I'm trying to check when I give it a new heave time history. Okay, I'm making it to predict the control input, and that predicted control input would be then applied to the actual winch model to see whether it's able to track it or not.
Can you repeat what are the inputs and
Yeah.
outputs?
So in the neural network, the input and output would be the output of the winch model, which is the reed length of the rope. Okay.
Okay.
When a PD control is implemented, and the input in this case, and the output of the winch output of the neural network would be the control input, the PD control input that has been applied to the winch model.
Okay, so the output will be the PD control.
Yeah, PD control. Yeah, correct. So it's like saying that we train it with that, and okay. So if here we are not knowing the dynamics. The dynamics was calculated when we had implemented PD control. Once we have done that, we have the input and the output, which is the control input time history and the output time history. We train it using neural network. And when we provide a new heave time history to the neural network, it tries to predict a particular control input, right?
Yeah.
So that control input would be then passed to the actual winch model, the realistic winch model, to calculate the output. And our task would be to see whether that output is tracking the output when PD controller would have been implemented, right?
Okay. Is it possible to give some example for this? Like just based
Yeah,
on
I'll try to give it later.
Okay.
I think here, Shrenik, isn't it kind of counterintuitive here that you need the PD control? So if you already have the PD control, why bother about LSTM? What was
Yeah,
the
that's right.
objective of this study then?
Yeah, the reason, what sir has said is right, that we actually, if you want to implement a PD control, then we actually know the dynamics. If we know the dynamics, then why implement data-driven control, right? But the reason I wanted the reason why I wanted to use data-driven control is I wanted to check whether, based on the data itself, am I able to control the system? Okay, and the reason why I'm doing is because it has never been done yet, and also,
I think it's not more of it has not been done yet, and rather it's a feasibility study that you're doing whether a long-term, short-term networks can learn, whether they're capable of at least learning even the basic control like a PD control, are they capable of learning that behavior or not?
yeah,
That was the primary goal behind this.
yeah. And the reason why I tried to give the training data from the PD controller's output and input is because if I hadn't implemented PD controller and just given random data, random outputs and random inputs, that is in the sense that I implement some random control input and apply it to the actual model and get the random control output, that output would not be oscillating about a fixed offset. It would be just reeling down or going up and would be doing some funky behavior, which I don't want the LSTM network to learn. I want the LSTM network to primarily learn that it should track this particular offset or that particular offset. So for that to happen, I need to use a particular controller to make sure that the output oscillates about that particular offset, so that I can give a lot of that data to the neural network in order for it to learn. That's the reason why I gave the training data from the PD control input and not just randomly give some control input and get some output and just directly feed it in the neural network. Okay. No.
I have a question, like in say practice, maybe like whatever we use as the input and output data for the LSTM, like the network will only learn to replicate that kind of behavior only, no? So like it won't say we think that our the input output thing that we are giving is not actually sufficient to uh, like it is not sufficiently producing the results that we actually want to see. So no matter what we train it with, it will only give at max best, as much as uh, at max best level to up to which our input and output are giving.
Yeah, correct. So just say that I give an input output data where there is no such data that includes oscillation about a particular offset. So if I don't have that data, the LSTM network might not learn that, right? That if I give this particular offset and I wanted to track that offset, I don't have data for it. Like the training data did not include that. So when it would be doing the prediction, it would be finding it hard to do that prediction. So in order to make sure that it can do that type of prediction, I gave only those training data about which an offset is fixed, so that it can learn that if I give that offset, it should show this control input, like it should show the correct predicted control input.
I think Vallabh has correctly pointed it out that the problem here, and I think that is what you should say up front, that it is primarily a feasibility study to see whether these are capable or not. Now, how to tailor the problem? Here, the problem is of data. What input you give and what output you give, what output you get. And indeed, if you already know the PD network, there is no need to train a network to emulate that behavior. You already have that controller with you. The primary goal here was to see whether such networks are capable of producing a signal input which can track or which can at least try to attenuate a constant reference signal which is provided to it. So that was the primary goal, not with the primary goal of using them as a controller directly. So you're right, Vallabh, in the sense that if we really wanted to use these LSTMs for the control applications, we would have to think about a more innovative approach to how to get the data for the training. And that is a problem which is not within the scope of what he's trying to do.
Yes.
So now talking about what LSTM is. Okay, so LSTM is one kind of RNN that takes the advantage of a feedback loop structure to store and memorize past information. It's because of this that it's widely used to learn time series data. Okay, and the figure shown here is a schematic diagram of a particular LSTM cell, one LSTM cell. I'll not try to go into the details of the mathematical formulation of this particular LSTM cell as to how it learns the memory. Okay, now the architecture that I used mainly comprised of 3 layers. The first 2 layers being the LSTM layers of size 64 units and activation of TANH, followed by a dense layer of size 1 unit and a linear activation. Okay. Now the input that would be given would be the output of the winch model, and the output would be the control input that we want to apply to the winch model. Okay, now regarding the training and hyperparameter tuning, the training data that I gave was a 20,000 second time history, with the input output data being co-connected for 4 seeds. So I had around 5,000 seconds.
Shrenik, I think you want to move to the result first.
Yeah, okay. So shall I skip this? Okay. So now talking about the results, the results that I got were not that great. And the reason why I didn't get that great is because of the control input. So the problem that I faced over here is that when I trained it and I tried to test it for a new data, the control input predicted that I got, that is the output of the LSTM network that I got. When I tried to check that with the actual control input of the PD controller, there seems to be a slight offset. Seems to be a slight shift upward. So it's like saying that I had a constant offset error between the predicted control input and the PD control input. So due to that, when I applied it to the actual winch model, the output kept on reeling down and down. So it's tried to oscillate due to the learned behavior, but it went on going down and down. So the orange curve here shows the output, which is the read length, when the LSTM model's control input is implemented, and the blue curve shows the output when PD control is implemented. So this is what I had given it as a data, but it did not learn that. And the reason why it happened is because there seems to be a slight error, a fixed constant error offset between the predicted control input and the PD control input. Now I tried to do various other things to check whether I can minimize that constant offset error. Like in the sense that I tried to give various various training data to it, which included different offsets. So that it can learn that if I want to make the output oscillate about this offset, it should apply this control input. So it's like saying that I gave around 1,100 offsets, okay, for a particular time duration as a training data for it to learn, and then see whether it's able to keep a particular constant offset when I command it to put at that particular offset. But unfortunately, it couldn't do. So the results that we got were not that great, and I thought of proceeding further and try to implement RL based control. So I'm still figuring out the way by which I can decrease that constant error in the offset. So, yeah.
It probably may not be possible because the choice is probably a ill-choiced solution for the type of problem that we are hoping to solve. It is more probably tailored towards reinforcement learning, less towards LSTM. It was a feasibility, but which clearly has demonstrated that LSTMs have difficulty in tracking any minor changes or minor differences. It will result in strong linear behaviors where the read length will start running off in one direction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I think you, in hindsight, you might want to remove the LSTM part from your presentation.
Okay.
Maybe in your thesis, because it is some work that you have done, but I don't think it really adds too much when you're presenting.
Okay, so sure. Now talking about what is RL. So RL is also similar, like similar to data-driven control in the sense that it does not require an actual model. So we don't need to know the actual dynamics. Okay, it's an area of machine learning considered as to how intelligent agents ought to take action environment in order to maximize a particular reward. So as per this figure, you can see that you have an environment where in the environment there would be dynamics. The RL, in what happens, RL is it tries to apply some random control input initially, and it gets some output, right? So it tries to learn from that output based on the reward function that we determine, and it tries to learn, and based on that, it tries to automatically change its control input. So this is also like saying that we don't know the dynamics. We're just applying some control input, and the RL agent is able to learn that behavior. So in this project, I have used deep deterministic policy gradient algorithm, so which is an algorithm based on actor-critic framework. And the reason why I chose this algorithm is because its action space is continuous and uses deep neural network to actually represent the policy. Okay, and this is the pseudocode of the DDPG algorithm. Okay. Now regarding the training, the RL agent was actually trained for 150 episodes for 3000 training steps with a sample time of 0.1 seconds. So it's like saying that I trained it for a 300-second time history in moderate sea state. So the reference that I took was that I calculated the net heave time history of the vessel in the moderate sea state and trained it for 300 seconds. Okay. So over here, I won't be giving any input output data. It's like just giving that I'm giving reference. Okay. And at each training episode, the RL agent would implement some control input and get some output. And based on what the output the RL agent gets, it will compare it with the actual reference that I've given, which is the net heave in moderate sea state. And based on the difference, it would try to learn that I should track this reference. Okay. So over here, the parameters that I assumed are shown in table 3. Okay. And the state space chosen for this application included 4 states, which is ZW and ZW dot, ZW winch and ZW winch dot. So over here, this ZW winch would be provided to me. So this is indirectly the reference. Okay. And ZW winch dot and ZW dot and ZW, which is the output that I would be getting. So this is the state space or the observation space that I've chosen. So I'm making the RL agent learn that I want ZW to be opposite of ZW winch. I want ZW dot to be opposite of ZW winch dot. So if I'm able to make the RL agent learn this type of behavior, my work would be done. And the action space that I had chosen was just one dimensional, which is the control input, which is the actual control input of the winch model. Now the reward structure that I chose for this application was as per equation 16, where EZ represents the compensated motion, that is the compensated motion of the payload, and EZ dot represents the velocity, the derivative term. So initially, if the payload displacement, okay, the compensated motion is greater than 0.05, I'm giving it a very high negative reward. Okay, and if its payload motion is within a particular limit, just 0.05 meters, then I'm making sure that it keeps on learning so that I get an R of 1. So it's like saying that if I have a high EZ value, the 1 minus 20 times EZ minus EZ dot would be close to 0, right? So lower the EZ value, lower would be the EZ dot. And if both are lower, R would be close to 1. So this is for one particular time instant. So since I'm doing the study for around 300 seconds, that is 3000 time step, these rewards would keep on adding up. And that total discounted reward would be learned. Based on that total discounted reward, the RL agent would learn that behavior. And that total discounted reward followed this function. Like I set the discount factor as 0.998. That means I gave the first output that I get and the second output that I get. The second output would have around 0.002% less weightage than the first output. Okay.
You want to wrap up in another 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes at max.
Yeah. Okay. So the DDPD architecture is shown here, and the reward that I got is shown in figure 5, where the average reward kept on increasing and became constant at around 150 episode. Okay. And then, okay. So now talking about the results, the figure over here shows the uncompensated motion of the winch for different C states, which is just a figure showing the uncompensated motion in different C states. And the heave compensation performance that I got for different C states are as follows, where in slide C state, the RL controller performed the best. Okay. And in moderate C state also, RL controller performed best. Rough C state also did well. And in very rough C state also it did well. Now, as the C state keeps on increasing, the chances of the pump attaining saturation would be high. Okay, so I want to check whether which control is able. If I want to check which control is able to handle saturation better, I need to focus more on the heave compensation performance. So if you see over here, heave compensation performance for RL almost remained constant. That is 95, 98, 99, and 96. So it's handled the saturation better. However, if you look at LQI control in slide C state, it had around 82.82. In moderate, it increased to 87. Then it went to 89 in rough C, 89 in rough C state. But in very rough C state, it faced saturation. And due to saturation, the swash angle, it lost its ability to control the payload and rather amplify the payload motion. Due to which I have written the heave compensation as 0%. Now talking about the ability of each controller handling the saturation of the swash angle, the figure on the left shows the compensated motion in rough C state for each of the controllers. If you see here at around 250 seconds, there was a high peak that took place due to saturation in the swash angle, the controllers were not able to control that payload motion, due to which LQI control suffered the most, and it wasn't able to regain its position, it wasn't able to regain its compensation power for a reasonable amount of duration. Similarly, on the right side, if you look, the first plot shows the uncompensated motion, the second plot shows the compensated motion, the RL controller, and the third shows for the PD controller. So over here also, RL controller also faced saturation at some time instant, but it had the ability to regain its compensation ability as soon as time passed. Okay, so yeah. So now talking about the ability in tracking and offset, these are the results that I got. So black curve indicates the uncompensated motion, and when I give a particular offset of 1 between 100 and 300 seconds, whether the controller is able to do it is shown here in the figure. If you can see, all the controllers are able to track the offset except LQI, which peaked up, shooted up a high amount and then regained its position. Similarly, when the offset was set to 0 again, it shooted down again and then went to 0 again. So other than LQI, all the controllers performed decently in tracking and offset. Now talking about the disturbance case, the figure on the left shows the spectrum of the compensated motions in moderate C state and the disturbance that we had talked about. So for that, I tried to generate a disturbance signal which followed a cut-in and cut-off frequency of 0.0 and 0.05 radians per second with a spectral density value of 10 to the minus 3. So when I tried to generate this and tried to see the spectrum of the compensated motion, this is what I got. Okay, so the plot over here on the left, you can see this is the spectrum of the compensated motion for each of the controller. Other than SMC, all the controllers were actually able to reject disturbance. So the dotted here shows the spectrum of the disturbance. So since I set the cutoff at 0.5, it's like this. And
why should the disturbance be in the low frequency?
Yeah, since the disturbance here, since in marine industry, like disturbance are mainly composed of low frequency signals like currents or winds, I tried to modulate as that. So I set the cutoff as 0.5 radians per second.
And the lower the curve here, the better is the performance, isn't it?
Yeah. So the lower the curve near the 0 and 0.5 radians section window, the better is the performance of the controller in rejecting disturbance. So over here, all the controllers did well except SMC, the pink one, which actually had some effect of the disturbance. Similarly, on the right side, the RL controller was actually able to do a very good job in rejecting disturbance, low value disturbance. So what I did is I tried to keep on adding, I tried to add the constant spectral density value of the disturbance to a higher value, say 10, and try to see whether RL control is doing better, and it did well in that case as well. So the figure on the right shows the comparison between RL and PD controller with and without disturbance. So there was a slight variation that was felt, but this was for a higher disturbance case. This was for a lower disturbance case. So if you look at the performance of the RL in a lower disturbance case, it performs similar to other controllers like PD and MPC.
2 to 3 minutes more.
Yeah, so now talking about measurement noise, I try to analyze in two sections, one using low measurement noise and other using high measurement noise with some cut-in cutoff, with cutoff being of higher value. So the figure on the left shows for different controllers what is the performance. So over here, SMC actually performed the best in attenuating noise and MPC performed the worst. Similarly on the right, if you see RL controller did a good job in rejecting, in attenuating noise as compared to PD. Okay, and yeah. And when I took a high measurement noise, these are the results that I got. In high measurement noise, what I faced is that I faced a saturation of the swash angle, because the output that I would be feeding back to the controller would be just Y plus the noise, right? So since the noise taken was of high value, the Y would be high. So due to Y being high, there would be saturation of swash angle that I observed. Due to that, the spectrum of compensator motion changed. Okay, but since we're interested in checking whether which controller is able to attenuate noise, you can see from the plot that SMC still performed best over here, and the worst was performed by MPC. Okay, and the effect of saturation was also more on MPC. Similarly, talking about RL, the RL controller performed better than PD. You see, and this plot is the log plot, not the state plot, linear scale plot. Because in order to see both those spectrums in one plot, I tried to plot the logs plot. And RL controller actually did a good job in attenuating noise at high frequencies. And PD did a good job at attenuating noise of low frequencies. Oh yeah, thank you.